So welcome everyone to the second webinar for the three-part webinar series of MLA's new R&D goat levy investment project, Consumer to Grid. This project's designed to help provide producers with a great insight into key aspects of our goat value chain and to help them understand how they can produce animals fit for farm purpose and for the role that they play across the value chain. Across these three webinar series, we're going to explore goat markets, consumer and customer dynamics. So I hope you've all had a chance to look at webinar 1 prior to this webinar, and today we're really going to build on those. My name is Dr. Melanie Smith, and I'm the Program Manager for Sheep and Goat R&D here at MLA, and I'm very pleased to have you join us today for this goat levy investment webinar. Before we get started, we'll run through some housekeeping. This webinar will be recorded and housed on MLA's Goat Hub Consumer to Grid website. If you haven't already completed your pre-webinar survey, it would be greatly appreciated if you can please scan this QR code and it will bring you to the survey to complete. At the end of the webinar, there will be a second QR code for our post-webinar survey where we're seeking feedback on the content, timing, and suggestions for future webinars. We really appreciate your honest feedback to continue and improving our webinar delivery. For this webinar, your microphones have been muted and your cameras are turned off. The webinar will be recorded and publicly available on the MLA website. And during the webinar, we do ask if you can please put your comments in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen, and we will endeavour to answer them in the Q&A session at the end of the presentations. The webinar today is hosted by Greenleaf Enterprises and Dr. Janine Teese, who is a Senior Supply Chain Analyst and worked on linking producers to markets in Australia, Southern Africa, and Southeast Asia. For the last 4 years, Janine has led the Greenleaf Enterprise R&D Goat program of work with a new product development, consumer and market analysts, and insights in the USA, Australian, and across Southeast Asia. Greenleaf Enterprises provides bespoke business analytics and insights while leading the red meat research and development projects and programs. This webinar will have a pre-recorded presentation prepared purely for this webinar series by TFI USA, starting with the Senior Commercialization Project Manager, Amanda, who will provide insights into the receival of goat carcasses and the cartons through the production of ground minced goat meat, including the tour of the TFI USA value-added facilities in the US through a 450 gram or 1 pound packs in the supermarket shelf. This is a really distinctive insight that we're going to gain today. After Amanda's presentation, we'll hear from Dominic, the corporate executive chef at TFI USA, and his insights into goat cooking techniques, the health benefits of goat meat, and examples of goat-based meals. Dominic's developed a ready-to-eat goat meat meals in the US, which has been recently developed and deployed. Next, we'll hear a pre-recording from Laura Brookham, a client insight manager of Spins. Spins is a Chicago-based data and analytics company using shopper points of sales data to create meaningful insights into retail product data. We'll understand how our Australian goat is going to be influencing consumer behaviours and driven growth through insights and collaboration on the US shelf. We're going to have a focus on consumer-based packaging from industry, and Laura's going to present sales of or how all this goat meat-based products by retail spend all the way to the checkout. It's not specific to Australian goat products, but it's specific to goat being exported to the US and covers all goat meat products from 90% of point of sales of data returned. The final presentation in our pre-recorded video is from Data Essentials. It provides food and beverage insights onto the food service sector across the US, which is driving the demand for Australian goat products. It's including where goat is found on the menu, which ethnicities and demographics consume goat in the US, and snippets of some social media goat consumer metrics. Lastly, this pre-recorded video will touch on MLA's promotional videos of our goat trails in Melbourne, where Sarah tastes different dishes from a range of restaurants across Melbourne and how goat is being consumed domestically in our market. I'll now hand over to Dr. Janine Teese, who will facilitate this webinar. Please enjoy.
Thanks, Melanie. We are going to have a listen from Amanda from TFI USA on the pre-recorded video.
The majority of the goats and goat carcasses that we receive come from our parent company, TFI Australia. These goats are completely free range, grazing on the unspoiled pasture lands of Australia, one of the most ideal regions in the world for raising and harvesting livestock. The environment supports their natural growth and ensures both health and quality throughout their life cycle. So once harvested, processed, and certified approved for future consumption, the goats are then shipped from Australia to our U.S. location in the Philadelphia region. A journey that takes around 6 weeks by sea. After arriving and clearing customs at the Philadelphia port, the product is transferred directly to our TFI facility in Swedesboro, New Jersey. Our Swedesboro site is an iHouse USDA inspected facility where inspectors from the Food Safety and Inspection Service are on site to ensure full compliance with U.S. food safety regulations. Upon arrival, the USDA reviews all health certificates and verifies approvals from veterinarians at our Australian processing plant. Once our product receives USDA approval and is stamped, it is officially received into our warehouse ready for future consumption, processing, and customer orders. Over the past year, we've been working closely with our customers to introduce goats in new and versatile ways. One of our most successful launches has been our ground goat, offering consumers an easy and adaptable option for preparing goat at home or in food service kitchen. In our production facility, the process begins with raw material being tempered in our microwave system to reach around 28 degrees Fahrenheit. From there, the product is sent through a flaker, which breaks down to the frozen meat into smaller pieces to prepare it for grinding. The meat is then ground twice, first through a coarse grind and then a final finished grind, ensuring the right texture and consistency for our consumers throughout. Finally, it runs through our packaging line where it is packed into either a 2.5-pound brick or one of our most popular formats, the conventional 1-pound retail pack. Other goat products we offer include bone-in and boneless cubes, stew strips, and fully cooked and ready-to-eat products. So why goat? Goat is one of the healthiest red meats that you can enjoy. It's naturally lean, low in fat and cholesterol, and an excellent source of protein, iron, and essential vitamins. Raised on Australia's open pastures, our goats thrive in a free-range environment, making goat meat not only nutritious but also a sustainable choice for our environment.
Hello everyone, my name is Dominic Zerilli. I'm the corporate chef of Thomas Foods USA. I want to start off by saying thank you, our trusted goat partners back in Australia. The work you do every day in raising the highest quality goat is really the foundation for everything we're able to accomplish here in the United States. In America, consumers know beef, pork, lamb, chicken pretty well. Goat still feels exotic to most people, and that's not because they don't like it. It's mostly because they're not familiar with it, they don't know how to cook it, and they've never actually tried it. The truth is, goat is very similar to other animals we already enjoy. A goat shoulder can be braised the same way as a lamb shoulder. Goat chops grill beautifully, just like lamb chops. Once people realize that, the barrier starts to come down. The times and temps might vary a bit because of muscle size and fat content, but most of the other cooking principles are the same. Goat also has an incredible nutritional profile. It's leaner than beef, lamb, and pork. It's lower in fat and cholesterol, but it's still rich in protein and iron. It's the better-for-you red meat, which fits perfectly with where the American diets are headed. Since goat is the most widely consumed red meat in the world, it shows a proven track record across the planet. Younger generations are looking for leaner yet sustainable proteins. Goat hits the mark with both trends, and their curiosity for global flavors make this the right opportunity at the right time. Our biggest challenge is education. Many home cooks don't know how to prepare goat, and even chefs tend to avoid it because they haven't worked with it before. But once once they get comfortable with it, they realize how versatile it really is. Restaurants will lead the charge with goat mania. If a consumer tries goat in a curry or in a taco at a restaurant, they're much more likely to try it at home. Focusing on the retail meat kit business, we want to make sure the consumer is comfortable with the goat of all red meats. By providing recipes, cuts, and done-for-you dishes that are familiar, we can showcase the versatility of goat. It's been enjoyed as a comfort food around the world, and now it's time to bring that experience here in America. The flavor's outstanding. Goat takes on marinades and spices as well as any other protein out there. Whether it's classic American chili, Mexican birria, Moroccan tagine, or simply grilled chop, it adapts beautifully. We try to pair goat with flavors Americans already know. This strategy makes goat approachable and exciting. Meatballs, dumplings, soups, and stews are all great introductions to the world's best kept culinary secret. One of the dishes I'm most proud of is our Thai coconut curry goat. The idea came from a seafood dish I created years ago in a restaurant, Thai coconut cioppino. I loved the flavors, but I knew goat could carry them just as well. So I adapted the recipe, tested it with our owners and CEO of Thomas Foods, refined it, and eventually we commercialized it for the US market. You, the farmers, are critical to this journey. The care, quality, and consistency of Australian goat means we can confidently introduce it to chefs, retailers, families here in the US. It's a product we're proud to stand behind. Looking forward, I believe goat has a place in everyday American dining. From food truck tacos, to a curry and a meal kit, to a roast for Sunday dinner, goat can and will become part of mainstream dining in the United States. To all of you in Australia, your hard work and dedication makes this possible. Together, we're helping more Americans discover the joy of cooking with goat, and we couldn't be more excited for what's ahead.
My name is Laura Brookman, and I'm a Client Insights Manager at Spins. My team here works with top brands in the CPG industry, and part of what we do is translate data into easy to digest insights, and that is precisely what I've done for you today. Okay, so I work closely with the Thomas Farms team, and I'm really excited to talk to you today about the positive sales trends that we are seeing in goat meat. The data that you're going to see throughout this deck is representing the latest 52 weeks of sales or the last year. Okay, just for a quick agenda here. First, we'll see who the natural meat shopper is in the United States, and we'll look at the most prominent label claims in the meat department. After that, we are going to dive into goat-specific sales. So we will analyze fresh versus frozen. We'll look at performance and share by segment, price per pound, and finally, we will assess where goat is selling regionally and by retailer. All right, so who are the natural meat consumers in the United States? Well, turns out millennials making a higher salary, likely with kids, over index here. What we're looking at is a dollar index for each of these demographic types listed in the left column. So demographic dollar indexes provide an understanding of the consumer profile of a category by comparing it to all household dollars. If the index is greater than 120, then the demographic is considered over-indexed relative to the population. Conversely, if the index is less than 80, the demographic is considered under-indexed to the population. Numbers between 80 and 120 mean the demographic is considered to be in line with expectations or average. So for example, if we start with the top row, this is telling us that consumers making a lower income under index as purchasers of natural meat. The middle column here shows the index numbers for natural frozen meat, and in the right column, we're looking at natural fresh meat. When we aggregate total meat sales, We're looking at a current growth rate of up 12% in the total US MULO Plus channel. So that's dollar sales this year versus last year. However, if we look at sales coming from claims-based meat, we're seeing that those products are growing at a much faster rate, up to 5 times faster for meat with the halal claim, for example. All of the claims listed here are growing very quickly and driving overall category growth. NAE, or no antibiotics ever, products hold the greatest share of sales, and they're growing almost twice as fast as the category. Grass-fed meat sales are growing at a rate of about 38%, and organic meat sales are up almost 48%. So now that we've talked about total meat sales and consumer trends, let's get into goat meat sales specifically. This section is also focused on the past year of sales through August 10th of this year, and it includes data from both the natural expanded channel, which is proprietary to Spins, as well as the MULO Plus channel. Okay, so I first wanted to ground you on the total US market goat meat sales. What we're looking at in this chart is dollar sales last year versus this year, broken down by frozen and fresh. So overall, total goat meat sales increased a whopping 88% versus a year ago. That is some crazy growth right there. The yellow represents fresh refrigerated goat sales, and the blue represents frozen sales. So we can see just a phenomenal increase in sales across both departments. Most of this volume is coming from conventional retailers in the MULO Plus channel. The natural channel currently contributes less than 400K in category sales, but that's just telling us that there is plenty of opportunity for more goat sales in the United States. We are just getting started. Here I broke the sales down even further. We are looking at the segments that fall under the goat meat subcategory. We can see on the right in the pie chart that close to 98% of sales are from ingredient cuts. About 82% frozen and about 15% from the fresh department. So we also have a really great opportunity from a product innovation perspective in goat as well. Fresh ground is the third highest distributed type of goat meat, and it currently only holds about 1% share of category sales. This segment actually consists of the exciting new Thomas Farms ground goat, which is being sold at Sprouts. Next is a price breakdown. So this chart shows the price per pound for goat meat by segment. Green dots represent fresh prices, and then the one blue dot represents frozen price. So only ingredient cuts are currently offered in the frozen department today. The average price per pound across all goat segments is $5.34. Ingredient cuts are less than that, and ground, which is only offered in fresh currently, it is a much higher price point at $9.97 per pound. One thing to note, though, is that all the ground sales, like I said, are coming from the natural channel, so price is just naturally going to be a bit higher. All right, so these two maps are showing category development indexes by region. The left map is for total meat and the right is for goat meat. A category development index, or CDI, reveals how developed a category is in a specific market compared to the national average. A value greater than or equal to 120 signifies overdevelopment relative to the population, and then values less than or equal to 80 indicate underdevelopment. When we look at the map on the left-hand side showing total meat, we can see that all the regions are similarly developed relative to the total population, because all of the CDI values are between 80 and 120. In other seeing any region which is over or under developed in meat sales relative to the population. The darker the regional color, the higher the share of dollar sales. So the Southeast came in number 1 for total meat sales, frozen plus fresh, and followed by the Northeast. Now on the right side, I did the same exercise for just goat meat sales. We almost see the opposite trend versus total meat in some areas of the US. While we do see the goat category development similar to total meat in the South Central, Northeast, and Mid-South, we also see that goat has better development in the Plains, California, and the West. So that's very interesting. And then compared to the total department, goat is currently underdeveloped in the Great Lakes and Southeast regions. So those are presenting the greatest opportunity for goat development currently. Finally, I wanted to give a retailer view of US sales. Keep in mind that this does not include all the specialty markets. So, the specialty Asian or halal or Hispanic markets, those all sell goat, and those are not included in our database. So just wanted to point that out. The bars are showing dollar sales broken down by frozen in blue and fresh in yellow. The gray line along the top is showing the cumulative share of goat sales. So for example, 23% of sales are coming from Wakefern, 43.9% of sales are coming from Wakefern plus Ahold, and so on and so forth down the line. Below the chart, I listed the dollar percent change versus last year. So it looks like Unify Fresh Goat is showing the highest growth rate right now, followed by Ahold frozen goat sales. But many of these retailers listed are showing strong double-digit growth. And that is what I have for you today. I really enjoyed, I'm turning my camera back on here. I really enjoyed putting this together for you, and I look forward to a continued partnership. Hopefully I can do some more in the future, and I hope that you learned something about our goat sales in the US market. So thanks so much for your time.
Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today's session. We'll be diving into goat as a food service protein, exploring consumer perceptions, menu adoption, and opportunities for growth. Goat is an increasingly relevant protein, and this report helps us understand where it stands today and where it's headed. Goat is actually the world's most popular red meat, even though in the US it's still relatively niche. It's known for being very lean, which appeals to health-conscious diners. Flavor can vary. It can be mild or quite bold, making it versatile across cuisines. Traditionally, it's often slow braised in rich, flavorful sauces, but we're starting to see it show up in street food, ethnic restaurants, and premium fine dining dishes. Today, goat appears on about 3.7% of US menus, and it's in the adoption stage of the menu adoption cycle. Consumer stats, 76% know it, 27% have tried it, 17% love or like it. Awareness and trial are both growing, with menu penetration up plus 5% over the past 4 years. Here we see a heat map of where goat is most likely to appear on menus across the U.S. Goat dishes are regionally clustered, often tied to areas with strong immigrant communities that have cultural familiarity with goat. This shows us opportunity. As awareness grows, we can expect goat to expand beyond these regional concentrations. Goat has strong menu versatility, scoring an 18, meaning it works across a wide range of cuisines. It also has a food versatility score of 16, meaning it pairs well with many ingredients and cooking styles. Common applications include curries, stews, braises, and street food formats like tacos. Pairings often include bold flavors and global spices, things like chilies, garlic, ginger, cumin, and cilantro. The key message here: goat is highly adaptable, which creates room for both traditional and innovative applications. Here, we break down consumer affinity by demographic groups. Goat tends to resonate more strongly among younger, diverse, and adventurous consumers. These groups are more open to global flavors and new protein experiences. For operators, this suggests positioning goat in ways that connect with Gen Z and millennials, especially in urban and multicultural markets. Finally, let's look at the trend line. Consumer love or like ratings for goat have been steadily climbing. From 2021 to 2025, we see a clear upward trajectory, proof that awareness, campaigns, menu innovation, and cultural influences are having an effect. Goat is still a niche protein in the US, but the data shows momentum and growing acceptance. The message to operators: goat is no longer just an ethnic specialty, it's entering mainstream adoption. We've just looked at the research. Now let's see the reality. Across the US, more and more people are discovering goat and making it part of their food stories. Here are some moments from consumers who are bringing goat to the table in their own way.
Gotta say, she can get a taste. She can get a taste. With it.
تغسل الذنوب وتنقي النفوس.
The meat section is going to be in the freezer section where all of the other meats are. Freezer goat meat. And this is the one.
Ground goat. Guys, I cooked it exactly like ground beef. Let's try it.
Did you know you can get a big box of goat meat from Costco? I wanted to get kept so bad. I've been craving goat for the past 2 weeks, and there's literally no Caribbean market and stuff around me. It was snowing so bad I didn't feel like going out. I ordered it from Instacart and got it delivered to my house.
Shout out to the girls that told me that Costco has goat meat at select locations.
And I'm back for the Goat Trail Part 2.
1, 2, 3,
I cannot wait to dig in. That tender, beautiful, sweet meat. You can smell the charcoal, the fennel and the coriander. It's so juicy. Oh, this meaty, smoky, makes you want more kind of flavor. Goat kept on the bone. So respectful, so delicious. It's very, very elegant, isn't it? I found goat mee goreng. This is great street food. I love it.
Around the world, goat has been a cornerstone of meals for centuries, and we're proud to be sharing that story here in the US. Whether in retail or food service, our mission is the same: to make high-quality goat more accessible, approachable, and celebrated. Because once people try it, they see its incredible flavor, versatility, and potential. You've seen the faces and places behind this work, the team, the partners, and the passion that drives us every day. This isn't just about introducing a product, it's about opening doors to new flavors, new experiences, and new opportunities. We're excited about the growth we're seeing, and even more excited about what's ahead. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Together, we'll continue bringing goat to the table.
That was the presentation from TFI USA on the international goat supply chain to understand where goat, when it leaves Australia, where it ends up and travels through to on the supermarket shelf. And also, so the first part of the video, we heard from Amanda, who gave us a tour of the TFI USA factory, which is based in New Jersey, near the port of Philadelphia. That's on the east coast of the USA. Then we heard from Dominic, and he showed us different goat cooking techniques and talked about the different benefits of goat meat, and also showcased the newly launched boneless ready-to-eat meals that are in the US currently, where they're looking to find distributors for those new products. Then we heard from Laura, who works for Spins and focused on retail point of sale insights for all of goat meat across the USA. So you may have seen some cuts with loin and that kind of thing, so that she looks at all of the goat meat. And then Data Essential presented us the menu insights, as well as consumer reviews from social media that we saw, for example, TikTok. Lastly, on the video, we saw the MLA Goat Trails promotional video where Sarah tasted a range of goat dishes in Melbourne. When we unpack the discussion that the video presented to us, the rest of the session that we're going to present today is all about understanding from farm to fork and what consumers value, and how we can then work back with the producers across the supply chain to make sure that that value is continually created and then passed on to the consumers, and that we can better meet consumers' needs and wants. So when we look at the video, there's various words that they used about what they value in Australian goat meat. They talked about a protein source, so high in protein, the leanness of the product, that it was natural. So we talked about the NAE was presented, so no antibiotics ever is a growing market segment, and goat consumers see that goat fits into this NAE segment, that it's grass-fed, it's environmentally sustainable, and there's a growing halal mark identified in the US as well as in Australia. The chefs and consumers are looking for consistency. When they talk about consistency, it's consistency in flavour, consistency in product availability, and also consistency in the fat coverage of on the carcass. The quality aspects that they're looking for is the meat to bone ratio, and all of the aspects I've just run through with in dark bold color that we've just covered, that's all value which is created in Australia. And then once the product is exported, then the value creation that happens in the rest of the supply chain about the portion size, for example, being ground and then put into 1 pound packs, that is happening in the value for that value that's created for the consumer is happening in the US, in the TFI USA value added plant. So the ground goat mince, that is an additional value that's added to the goat meat in the US. So while there's different areas along the value chain that we'll look at through the rest of this presentation about where that value is created, and it's important to understand where it's created and then how it's communicated through the chain. To unpack a little bit about what Laura was saying in the Spins presentation, is that there's, on the point of sales data, there's two types of data that she accessed to do the analysis. One is natural and the other is convenient. So in the natural channel, where she talked about the natural meat shopper, they are from the supermarkets along the top up here, like Sprouts, Infa, Fresh Time, and they are traditionally known as like natural, organic market kind of shops. The conventional, which the database comes from Sakana, is like Kroger, Wegmans, Wakefern, Target, etc. So the point of sales data from those organizations. So currently the goat mince from TFI USA is sold in Sprouts, which is part of the natural channel, which if you shop at Sprouts, you're going to Sprouts expecting to have natural or organic ingredients that you're looking to put in your supermarket trolley. When the unpacking of who's actually buying goat meat, they mentioned that the millennials are the highest meat purchasers, and so that's an age bracket of 29 to 44 years of age at the moment. Typically, upper income people are spending more on meat, but also anyone with an ethnic background and also with children, they tend to be the bigger meat shoppers. So the opportunities identified for goat meat in the USA is really targeting what we term the conscious consumer. So they're the consumer that's looking for things to do like health and wellness, environment, sustainability. So they're all packaged typically into one consumer setting. So we saw higher than average goat meat consumed in California, and that we attribute to the health conscious consumer market in California, where we've seen that in other research. The opportunities for goat meat, as currently it's typically as an ingredient product, but there's lots of opportunities for innovation and value adding. For example, in convenient meal solutions, either in the fresh or frozen section, there's deli meats, and then snacks and baby foods are areas within the supermarket, a grocery shopper trolley where goat meat is not touched at all. So there's lots of opportunities for goat meat to expand into other market segments and other sections within the supermarket. A little summary of the work that TFI is doing on their market development, and the chef Dominic's explained a little bit about this, as they're starting with consumers that are familiar with goat, then they're distributing into the wholesale club stores, in the club stores in the US like Costco, where restaurants buy from Costco, food service, and also the home cooks are buying from Costco. We've developed smaller pack sizes, so it's the portion pack of the 1 pound and 2 pound packs mean that it's for one meal only, and that's very important going forward, where consumers are focused on waste reduction. Then the next that we're looking at is how we can get it into the chain store restaurants as a food service, to have goat in a taco or in the Indian, Asian restaurants, and then the ready to eat products into the retail stores is the next market development that we're doing. So that's the summary that of the international case study presented from TFI. The next part of the webinar, I will present insights from the domestic market in Australia. I've interviewed over 40 people in the last 2 months and over 100 people in the last 4 years about the goat market, so of all aspects of the supply chain. And I'll give a presentation about the different domestic supply chains that I've interviewed, and also findings, as well as building on 30 years experience of working in value chains in Australia and across the world. They're starting with the domestic goat meat supply chain. So there's a difference between a supply chain and a value chain, and in this presentation we'll unpack the difference between the two. We'll also have a look at what is a value chain analysis and why is it important to actually unpack and do it and look at value chain mapping to understand where the product's going and who's consuming it. We will look at 3 different value chains in Australia with domestic goat consumption, and I'll also provide some insights from retailers and food service sector that I've interviewed. So value chain versus supply chain. What's a value chain? A value chain, in the term of the agricultural setting that I prefer to work in, and when I'm talking about the differences between value and supply chain, is a value chain focuses on what the customer and the consumer values. The supply chain is the physical moving of goods along the chain. So typically the supply chain, you produce and then you just sell the goods wherever you can, where the value chain is you actually ask the customer what they value, and then you build the chain to ensure that you can create and deliver that value to what the customer wants. So the final value that's created by the product is actually what the consumer is prepared to pay. So that value is then shared across the rest of the supply chain. So there's no, if you want to increase the value across the supply chain, you have to increase the value that the consumer is prepared to pay for the product. There's also a difference between customer and consumer. Many people use the word interchangeably or words interchangeably, but a customer in the context of value chain, supply chain analysis that we're doing is anyone who buys the product and service next down the chain, where the consumer is the final point in the chain. So if you're a producer and you sell to a processor, they're your customer. The processor sells to a wholesaler, they're their customer, and then so forth until we get to the final point in the chain of the person who actually consumes the product is called a consumer. So with value chain analysis and value chain mapping, there's three distinct flows. There's a product flow, there's an information flow, and there's a financial flow. So the product flow is actually where the physical product moves and what entities that it moves through. Where the information flow is, does information flow up and down the chain? And does that information about what the customer is prepared to pay for flow up the chain? Also, if the customer is and consumer is valuing a story about where the product was produced and how it was produced, is that story continuing down the chain with that product? That story adds value and consumers are prepared to pay for that value, but is that story actually making its way right down to the final endpoint with the consumer? The financial flow. So the financial flow is about actually changing in product ownership. So a product may move, but it may not change financial ownership. So those three sections of a value chain mapping need to be done independently to actually understand where the product is going, what information is flowing and up and down the chain, and what financially where the transactions are. So this slide has examples of the goat meat supply chains that I've reviewed. For example, we looked at producer to processor, butcher to consumer, and then we've looked at producer to processor, wholesaler to retailer consumer. Note that there may be different ways that the goat meat goes through the supply chain. These are just some that I've analysed for this presentation. There may be the value adding in point 4 may happen at the processor, or it may happen at the wholesaler, or it may happen at the butcher shop. The restaurants that I've interviewed all seem to buy from butcher shops or wholesalers. So noted as in the previous slide as well, that the financial ownership is not necessarily the same as the product ownership, and they may be different. And in chain 1, where we've got producer, processor, butcher, consumer, the ownership may stay with the producer. So he may have the product come out of the butcher shop in pre-packaged, and then pick that product up from the butcher shop pre-packaged and then take it to the consumer. So even though it looks like it's changed hands, the financial ownership is still actually with the producer. So what should a value chain analysis include? And why would you do a value chain analysis? So when you're looking to develop new market outlets or increase the value of products, it's important to do a value chain analysis. First thing that you need to do is identify all the potential customers and consumers. And then from these different customers and consumers to segment them into or target markets. And the segmentation can be based on a number of factors. And in marketing, what we've seen for the goat consumers, they've fallen typically into 2 types of consumers. The first type of consumer is the ethnic consumer, They are very familiar with goat and the conscious consumer, and they are looking for goat because of its health and wellness attributes. They're also looking because of its environmental benefits and sustainability. So the ethnic consumer is typically has a low to mid income. Their core values as a consumer is they're looking for value for money. They prefer to buy their meat fresh. They prefer natural products, and they shop a minimum of 2 to 3 times a week. They are interested in the story. They're interested in the story because they're wary of substitution. So sometimes they may ask for a goat leg to be cut up into cubes as in a format that they like, so they know they're actually buying a goat leg and there's not mutton mixed in with it. The ethnic consumer typically is buying from butcher shops and specialty grocery stores. The conscious consumer, on the other hand, is buying from farmer markets, direct from producers, from co-ops, health food stores, and retailers that they trust. So when you're developing your value chains, once you've identified who you think your market segments are, it's important that the product is actually in the place that those target consumers shop so they can find the product. The core values of the conscious consumer is that they're into health, wellness, environmental sustainability, and they are prepared to pay more for these attributes. They need to know the story behind the product, and examples that I've been working with other supply chains is they've got a QR code on the packaging, and that QR code takes them to a video on their website which talks about the provenance or where the product was produced and grown and gives the background story. It's important to understand that there are many different market segments and niches, and to map those out and work out which ones you are going to target. And notice they also do move over time. So continually to check in and work with your supply chain and also with potential supply chains where you are interested to supply. Once you've identified the different segments that you're wanting to target with your product will meet their attributes and values, then it's to really understand in depth of what creates value to those customers and consumers. For the conscious consumer, they are more interested in ready to cook products. For example, roasts ready to go in the oven, or meat already cubed up, ready just to put into stews or braises or curries, whereas other consumers may be happy to cut up and process the products themselves. When you're working with the supply chain, each point in the supply chain will also have areas that they value for them. For example, some inner city butcher shops do not have the space for them to be able to cut up product. So they're looking for retail ready packs as well, despite the fact that they are in a butcher shop. They just don't have the space to, or they may not have the staff available to prepare from whole carcasses. It's also of interest to the supply chain and value chain to understand what the customers and consumers are prepared to pay more for. So some consumers are prepared to pay more for organic or no antibiotics, where an environmental sustainable, but typically the research that I've been doing over the last 25 years is that the conscious consumer is prepared to pay 10 to 20% more for the package of environmentally sustainable, plus knowing that there's each person in the supply chain is paid appropriately. So it's not that each different attribute you can continue to add value to. Sometimes there's actually a limit, and each consumer has their price point limits. Which brings us to the next slide of there are maximum price points that you need to work on for different consumers based on the value that's provided to them. So in some cases, if it's the price point is above what they're prepared to pay, they will switch to substitutes. So a price point is not necessarily purely economic, but as it may be a perception of what the product provides. So for example, is it environmentally sustainable? Is it nutritious? Is it healthy? Is it ready to heat and eat? Is it ready to just add into a curry ready to cook? So it's about perception that the value creates, and it's also about perception of the product. So with the product positioning, you can actually create a brand that tells a story to improve the positioning of the product. So in the research that I've undertaken, what we've identified is that for some consumers, that if goat meat is not available or it's not at their price point, it's not substituted with anything else. So for religious reasons, Hindus are not eating beef, they're not going to substitute. So for cultural familiarity, there's Africans, people from the Indian subcontinent, the Caribbean, the islands, that if goat is their first preference, and if it's not there, they're not typically buying other meats, or they'll have a look at chicken, but their first preference is actually goat. When I questioned about this, the answer about why they were preferring goat over chicken is that it was seen as a more natural product. It's raised on the rangelands, and it's better for you. So that's a number of interviews that have been conducted over the past couple of months identified that the focus of goat was about its natural product and the fact that it was lean and it's high in protein. So when undertaking the value chain analysis, it's interesting to just observe customers and consumers and also look at other products within the category. So when we're in the USA conducting research about the opportunities for goat, then we're in the category of the fresh meat, and the bison was there as the 1 pound pack, and it's consumed by health conscious consumers for that product. So the goat is positioned beside the bison meat as a healthy alternative. Then if you we looked at the other types of ready to heat and eat meat and understood that there's a Mexican ready to heat and eat meats, and so positioning goat within those opportunities. So to have a look within the category and other supply chains and products. It's also interesting to have a look at consumers in their natural habitat. So the shopping centre or in the butcher shop or at the markets, of what they're doing, what are they looking at, and to engage with the different customers or potential customers and ask them what are they looking for, what are they interested in when they're in the fresh meat section. So an example, a senior product developer in dairy industry was in the aisle for the chilled yogurts, and he was watching two young children and a mother trying to shop, and the mother couldn't reach the round 1 litre yogurt tub and pick it off the shelf with one hand while she was juggling her two children. And so he went back and developed a product where the yogurt containers are now rectangular shaped 1 litre rather than the round 1 litre that they used to be. And so the consumer can actually put their hand around the rectangular shaped 1 litre yogurt container and pick it off the shelf. So that not only did it help with reducing the packaging required to ship the same amount of products, that it's stacked better, but also that the consumer is now able to simply, easily reach the rectangular product off the shelf. So just by pure observation, then it had massive product development in the shape of the packaging. So sometimes it's not just the product itself, but also the packaging has a lot to offer in value addition to the consumer. The next part of undertaking a value chain analysis is to ask open-ended questions, and that's open-ended questions to everyone in the chain, as well as to new, existing, or potential or prospective customers and consumers. The questions that you may ask are, how would you prefer to buy your goat? In what form? For example, fresh, frozen, ready to eat, cubed, ready to roast. Where do you purchase your meat products from? What price are you prepared to pay? And for a ready to roast product, for a ready to eat product, and what do you want to know about the product and where it came from? So from those questions, you can actually then start to build your value chain and the offer that you have. The other thing that's interesting in dealing with consumers and customers is if they don't actually know what they don't know. So it's difficult to ask them, what form would you like goat in, if they've never eaten goat or don't know or haven't experimented with it. So it's really interesting to be able to work with key influencers. Before influencers was the craze word, but to work with key chefs, other people who the general consumer looks to, and give them samples and then work with them on getting their feedback and then giving them a different sample and a different product, and iteratively work with them and develop a continuous improvement mindset to say, like, what about if I gave you this? What would it mean? What price point would you be prepared to pay? So that's often something that I recommend to people, particularly in new product development or when you're innovating, is that consumers won't actually know because they've never seen it before and they're not sure. So how do you create value? There's a number of different aspects that you can use to create value. One is R&D into new product development. Another is the product and packaging, which I talked about, the shape of the 1 litre yogurt containers. That's where we have worked with TFI USA. So we've got 2-pound goat cubed bags rather than previously it was in a 20-pound box. So production is about streamlining efficiencies across the chain. And it's really interesting that if you work with your customers up and down the chain to actually understand and again offer them different product samples and different solutions of how things can work, because there are many ways to actually create efficiencies in supply chains. And the more efficiencies that you can create, the more value that you can share amongst each other, because remembering that consumer is not going to pay anything more for the product they get. So whatever they pay, that value has to be shared with everyone in the chain. So the more that you can remove inefficiencies, the more that you can then share. So for 10 years, I was working as a marketing and agribusiness lecturer at the University of Queensland. And when I was lecturing in supply chain management, one of my students, her parents owned a business, and she went home with her assignment to do a value chain analysis on part of the product that her parents sell. And so she contacted a customer in New Zealand and asked them, would it be possible if we could change the way that we work? How can you receive the product? And by just asking that question, they found out that they can actually receive the product in 1-ton bulk bags, which they were unaware of. So they were packaging in small bags, packing and shipping them to New Zealand, where by basically taking the all the smaller packages out and sending it, packing in Australia in a 1-ton bag, loading it into the container, it loads by a forklift, not by hand. And then packing in New Zealand, the same thing. It's a 1-ton bulk bag that they can just open and use in the manufacturing. That completely changed the dynamics of the supply chain and cut a lot of costs out. So it's not just how can we get the consumer to pay more, but also what are the efficiencies in the supply chain that we can actually create more value to share amongst ourselves. Sales and marketing. Sales and marketing is about how can you deliver key, consistent messaging about the value of the product along the supply chain and also to potential consumers. So after sales, service and support, that's interesting to work with, particularly with new product development, of helping consumers understand how, for instance, different recipes to cook goat and new opportunities for butcher shops to understand where goat meat could be consumed. There was research done a couple of years ago where butcher shops didn't know how to cut up goat for how the consumers wanted it. So consumers were asking them for goat, but then the butcher shops said, I don't know how I meant to cut up the goat carcass. How does the customer actually want to eat it? So this is working with the supply chain to help the butcher shops and the people involved actually know what products are needed and what they should look like, and basically ensuring that everybody along the chain is satisfied with what and getting the optimum they can. So we're going to unpack a chain where I've analysed, and it's from a producer to a retailer. The processor is toll processing. So the producer is owning the product through and then supplying to a retailer. So improving the value chain in this instance, my recommendation would be, and the people involved, what they did is they went and interviewed potential retail stockists to understand who their target consumers were, as in the retail stockers. So make sure that the product that you're supplying actually fits the target demographic that retail shop has, and what their consumers value, and then also what the potential stockist and customer values. So do they value the carcasses coming in as whole carcasses? Do they value it do they need it to be delivered 3 times a week, or do they have enough cold room space to be able to have once a week delivery? So it's understanding what the butcher shop needs, or retail stockist needs, and then it's understanding who their consumer market is and what they need. And together you can develop products and build the value chain to match what their customers and consumers are willing to pay for. The last point in this slide is about how you communicate those value propositions to the existing customers and to the market, so that you can access additional customers with similar target values. So with goat meat is that there's no right or wrong way in that is it frozen or is it chilled. Each different element has potential value attributes depending on which supply chain and value chain that you find and align yourself with. So some customers absolutely want bone in ready to cook, where some customers are after boneless. So some are after frozen because of the extended shelf life, and some are after chilled or fresh meat. So within the different potential value attributes that you have, nothing is in a sage that you can't say you can't do that because it's not going to be beneficial, it's not going to add value. It will add value. It's a matter of identifying the value chain that you need to be a part of for those people and entities in the value chain to be willing to pay money for. So for example, small carcasses are highly prized by some markets because the whole carcass is put on the spit, it's used for festivals. A medium carcass is prized for people who want to have a 2 kilogram leg roast, where a larger carcass that's really meaty is great because then you can bone out the leg and have a boneless product. So each has different, basically horses for courses of where, and so it's about finding the different niches and the different elements that you can build in with the value chain. So the elements that I've got in bold in the slides are about a robust flavour, whether it's free range or farmed, seasonal or consistent supply, and the carcass size. Those are all value attributes which are determined by the producer. The remaining value attributes of whether it's pre-packed, retail ready, or if it's got a bulk pack, that's all determined by other parties in the chain. So it's important as part of when you're building the value chain is to be able to align the live carcass traits with what the supply chain or value chain values. So the domestic butchers in Australia that I've interviewed or spoken to people who supply domestic butchers is that they are looking for a good meat to bone ratio, and this is because this is what their customers and consumers are asking for. Their customers and consumers at the butcher shops are asking for year-round supply of goat. They don't want to walk in one week and have goat on the shelf and not the next. Then they're looking for a narrow weight range, and typically it's because the 2 kilogram leg is what they can afford to purchase. The narrow weight range of ends up with the carcasses about 10 to 12 kilograms in carcass weight, up to 14 kilograms depending on which supply chain that you're working with. The supply chain butcher shops and the customers and consumers are looking for a consistent fat coverage and flavour profile. So as mentioned in the previous slide, a robust flavour profile is revered by some consumers, particularly in the Caribbean, where they've got really spicy curries that they love to add a robust flavoured goat meat into. So it's not about that everybody wants a mild flavoured goat meat. They don't. It's about how do we label it in a consistent way and have the product differentiated so the consumer gets what they're expecting, and having that consistent supply, so it's a consistent flavour and consistent expectations. The butcher shops also are interested, because the consumers are, in about traceability and provenance. Is it a natural product? Is it safe and hygienic? And there's often questions, is it halal for the Muslim market? The product range that's supplied into the butcher shop depends on the in-store resources that they have, their capacity to be able to process, and the clientele that they're working with. So sometimes it's whole carcasses which are supplied, sometimes it's shelf-ready, retail-ready cuts, and others it may be bulk cuts, for example, cubes. So how do we build a production system and a supply chain that meets the values that the goat consumers are looking for? So the first one that everybody is talking about is a good meat to bone ratio. The discussion with the different supply chains that I've been working with is to have a lean, meaty type animal to be selected for breeding. And particularly if we can have smaller bones, and the shoulders is one of the areas where the bigger shoulders are not wanted in, because we're wanting to have as much meat to bone as possible, particularly for the cuts that are diced up. Also in some cuts that are boneless, or if they're made into chops, we want a good proportion of meat to bone. The weight ranges, there's multiple different markets that can supply the different weight ranges. So if there's more larger carcass, there's an opportunity with value adding facilities to be able to bone out that carcass to have boneless cubes, or to have a minced product, or for example a boneless leg. Butcher shops have a really narrow weight range in the carcasses that they can accept and sell. Export plants, on the other hand, have multiple markets and multiple weight ranges that they can accept. So when you're working out what animals to go to where, to understand the specifications of the target market. So butcher shops supplying domestically have a really narrow weight range, and outside of that, everything else can go into an export plant because they've got a number of markets. Building production systems to enable year-round supply is another challenge. So some groups of suppliers are staggering mustering to enable a number of supply dates. Others are working with controlled mating with different drops throughout the year. Some are mustering the stock and sorting into smaller paddocks and then supplying as agreed with the wholesaler or processing plant. And others are holding goats closer on properties closer to processing plants. For instance, if it rains, then they're still able to access them to be able to have a consistent supply of product year round. Because once you break down the market to get into the butcher shops and have consumers asking for goat, the last thing that you want is for a couple of weeks of goat not to be on the shelf, and then they will either stop looking for goat or drift off elsewhere. So when we're building a production system in a supply chain, my recommendations is to set product specifications for live animals, which then those product specifications translate into the desired carcass traits that the consumers and customers are looking for. To find a supply chain number of partners that fit your culture and ethos. So as mentioned earlier in the presentation, value can be either created or destroyed, and so you want to make sure that that value is actually translated through the entire supply chain. So part of that value creation and maintenance is making sure you minimize stress, the time in the yards and the time the animals are off feed, and in further down the chain is ensuring that goat is not mixed with, for example, other products like mutton. There have been instances where I've seen that value adding is happening where a producer is using a processing plant, toll processing, and then the carcass goes to a butcher shop. The butcher shop cuts up according to the specifications provided by the producer, and then they sell either onto other retailers or they then provide those to other butcher shops. So in regional areas, they've still got who still have access to staff and qualified butchers. I've seen a lot of supply chains recently using these butcher shops as a place that they can actually cut up their products and then on sell to consumers that are looking for a value-added product. There is an example of producers selling direct to consumers. Examples include through their own channels, through farmers markets, or through co-ops that are selling fresh produce and meat. In these markets, the seasonality is tended to be acceptable, and knowing that it will be premium animals, so there's only possible for a portion of your herd. And speaking to a number of people who do this, it's actually difficult to sell all the cuts from the carcasses. So some people have a preference for certain cuts, but when you go down this line, it's actually quite difficult. It's also a large number of skill sets are required to manage the entire chain, and you do need to be able to access a small stock processor to be able to toll process. So now we're going to dive into a wholesaler-centric value chain. And this wholesaler is buying direct from producers. They've developed their own specifications, they toll process, and then they supply to their customers. Their customers are butcher shops, retailers, other wholesalers, and food service restaurants. So the product that they sell is goat carcasses. They supply the goat carcasses into butcher shops and wholesalers, as mentioned, and they buy over the hook direct consignment from producers. They have specifications that they provide the producers. So their target is 10 to 12 kilograms dressed, 0 to 4 teeth. Oh, it's just gone one head. Less than 2 years of age, with little to no fat coverage on the carcass and a high meat to bone ratio. And they have adjusted their pricing grid to reflect what they are looking for in their carcasses. So this wholesaler, they target consumers that are familiar with goat. These consumers are doing slow cooked dishes. They can buy whole carcasses and the butcher breaks it down for them, or they'll buy a leg from the butcher shop. And as mentioned, that they are looking for a high meat to bone ratio, low fat, and typically they buy around 2 kilograms. Some consumers are asking for male goat only, but if they're not prepared to pay extra, then the supply chain doesn't supply it to them. For special occasions when they are prepared to pay extra, they will separate it out. To guarantee the product quality through the supply chain, they've created the weight and dentition specifications. They don't see the need to castrate because they're selling young, but this is a supply chain specific term. So other supply chains do castrate as required based on their supply chain. There is no market for older animals through this supply chain, so they need to be consigned to an export plant. The next section will provide insights from retailers and butcher shops. The first retailer that I interviewed was a meat-centric shop, and they're selling about 5% of their product is what they call game meat, so goat, venison, rabbit, and kangaroo. And their diced bone-in goat meat is selling for $18.99, and they occasionally sell whole legs. Their customers are very familiar with goat and have grown up with it. They don't believe there's any other substitution for goat. They come in searching for goat, buy goat, and then leave. They have a vertically integrated supply chain that they're buying from, so they can guarantee the quality of the goat that they're selling. The second retailer is a grocery-centric retailer, and they purchase whole carcasses of goat and then they cut it up in store for their customers. Again, their customers are very familiar with goat and they're not interested in substitutes. Their value is that it's fresh. They're looking for diced bone-in cuts, or they're looking for mixed cuts, and all the product is sold on the bone. Their customers are asking for a good meat to bone ratio, no to very limited minimal fat coverage. They want it fresh, a mild flavour, halal, and preferably in diced portions. The challenge that this grocery-centric retailer is facing is consistency of supply. They're very happy with buying in the goat carcasses and cutting up because they said there's minimal wastage and it's sold as a bone-in product. So some insights from food service. As in Brisbane, there is a ready to heat and eat meals which have goat available on Sri Lankan based dishes. They're sold in IGAs, convenience stores, service stations, and independent grocers within the Brisbane area. Their suitable target market is Muslims and Hindus because of the way that they've paired the flavours and the rice, and that it's ready to eat, available, pick up and go from service stations. So their promotion is through social media. They are buying fresh product, not frozen. They want a consistent product, flavour, texture, and tenderness. So not necessarily tender for a specific purpose, but just not old and tough were their specifications. They want to make sure it's pure goat. They don't want any fat with it, and they prefer leg meat. So they sell it as boneless small cubes. They feel that if it was bone-in, they're eating with a spoon. People don't want to be spitting out bones when we've got a takeaway meal. And the feedback that they have got is that people feel cheated when there's bones in the product when they're buying the takeaway container to eat. The Indian restaurants that I've interviewed is the customers and consumers are assuming that because they order a curry, that the meat will be low fat. For high-end service, they don't want it bone-in, and particularly for the elderly and the young, they want it boneless as well. So overall, what do consumers value in goat meat? It's a natural product, it's high meat to bone ratio, it's lean, it's environmentally sustainable, and it's a very versatile protein. It's compliant with a number of religious requirements. What they're chasing is consistency, year-round supply, and a consistent flavour profile with a young to medium-aged animal. So the quality attributes is presented on the slide, that the flavour profile can be from mild to bold. All flavours have a place. It's about consistency and it's about branding those flavours. So currently, to be able to determine those flavours, they're set specifications by the supply chain, and those specifications are weight, dentition, and a general visual body condition score. So the tenderness is not important for most goat meat consumers because they're using low, slow cooking methods. It's wet cooking, and it also tenderizes in the bag, some research has shown. So the core quality attributes that consumers are chasing and interested in is the meat to bone ratio, the fat coverage, and the flavor profile. Marketing and branding has the opportunity to be able to communicate those desired attributes that customers and consumers want to them. So the research topic that is of interest, I think, for the goat industry is how can we distinguish between the different flavor attributes? Knowing that for mainstream markets, we've got the desired attributes, which we've stepped through in the previous slides. So the next part of the webinar will be taken from a Greenleaf Analytics point of view of what does it look like in a processing plant when you're processing goat? What are the implications from the value chain perspective and also implications from a cost basis? So the smaller carcasses in a meat processing plant tend to be sold as whole carcasses, and the heavier carcasses are sold as six-way. If the processing plant has the right licenses, market access, equipment, and labor, they may do some bone-in diced cubes, some boned out product, or some bulk packs, or some retail-ready packs. The costs, the way that the processing plant works, if they're purchasing the animals, they're purchased over the hook and a hot carcass weight. The processing plant absorbs the 3% shrink, which ranges from 2 to 5%, or 0 to 5%, depending on the systems in the plant. And then they sell the carcasses or the product on a cold weight. So with a whole carcass, there's a sock that goes over the carcass, and then there's the labor to load out plus transport. For some markets, it's tedious with every goat thoroughly inspected to make sure that there's no hairs on it. So the goat does have a higher expense labor-wise to prepare for some markets. The variable costs in processing goat is that it depends. So variable costs are costs which change on the volume of production. So for example, the carton liners and wraps, the casual staff and transport are all variable costs. The fixed costs are the base business costs. So what happens is that the processing plant will say be able to process 4,000 small stock per day. And those are fixed costs need to be covered by the amount of head are processed per day. And if the animals are smaller, then they still have to cover the amount of costs gone through. So if the goats are a smaller weight, then they are selling, the revenue that the processing plant gets is on a dollars per kilogram for products sold. So the fixed costs play a critical role here in how do we be able to share more value up and down the supply chain is by how can we help reduce the fixed costs or increase the revenue of the kilograms of meat sold per carcass processed. So in some processing plants, there's a little bit of value adding happening. However, it requires costs added to that. So with value adding, it's not automatic that you actually make more profit. It's important to actually break down the value adding in what are additional costs and what actually can the consumer pay more. So sometimes you can do more things, but the consumer is not willing to pay, then that's not advisable to continue to value add in certain areas. So in summary, the value attributes across the supply chain, that the processor is looking for the producer to supply a disease-free animal with a good meat to bone ratio, has a small fat coverage and is delivered to plant on time as they've indicated. The producer is supplying a 2 to 4 tooth animal, for example, less than 2 years old, and is paid over the hooks. The processing plant is then on selling a 12-kilogram carcass as well as some offal, and that's sold as a cold carcass weight to a butcher shop or a wholesaler or another retailer in the grocery sector. What the retailer is looking for is a good presentation of the whole carcass or the products. They're looking for good cold chain management, and they're looking for it to be delivered to them. The consumer is looking for the retailer to provide them with a good presentation product that has a good meat to bone ratio and is convenient for them to purchase. When they're purchasing it, they're usually doing slow cooking, wet cuisines, curries. The retailer can supply different products to the consumer depending on their needs and wants. And this is based on a supply chain of a domestic wholesaler-centric facility. So in summary, we have looked at the international supply chain case study of TFI USA. We've unpacked a number of domestic supply chain case studies. We've gone through the key attributes of what a value chain is and how to build value chains. And we've also looked at a little bit about the processing plant costs and the value creation dynamics within a processing plant. So this concludes my presentation. If you've got any questions, please put them in the Q&A panel. We've got the next webinar coming up on the 14th of October, and you will be sent, if you've been on this webinar for live, you'll be sent an invite for that. If not, please go to the Goats Hub's website and sign up for the next webinar. There is a QR code on this page which will take you to a post webinar survey. We're very interested your feedback of what you would like to hear more of, particularly given this will be the last webinar on the 14th of October as part of this series. So looking forward to any questions that you have as we go to the Q&A panel.
Janine, I think there was a question in there around the supply chain product flow.
Yeah, with the depot after the processor. Yeah, so there is one of the supply chain. So the question was about on the list that I had of supply chains that I analyzed, there was one supply chain and it went from producer to processor, and processor it went to a meat depot, and then from that meat depot, as opposed, and I think maybe they were thinking like depot as in like the live animal, but it actually went to a meat depot, and then in the meat depot it was then distributed. So it's a butcher shop chain that they have, like a depot in Brisbane where all the different butcher shops get their deliveries come out of that depot. So the different products are supplied into the depot in Brisbane, and then the chain of butcher shops around southeast Queensland and into further north as well. There's a few shops in up the coast. They supply out of that central depot across to their range of stores. So yeah, that was a different supply chain that rather than just to an individual depot, or sometimes wholesalers are delivering to individual butcher shops. This chain of butcher shops had their own depot that they're working. So that's, I think, Mel, the last of the questions that we've got for today. If anyone else has any questions?
I think so. And if anyone else has questions that they think of after this webinar, please do send them through and we can answer those as well.
Yeah. So if anyone's got any questions about supply chain or the value chain analytics, my email is contact@greenleaf.com. tailor.com.au. So happy for people to send me email post webinar.
I think we can probably wrap it up there, but thank you very much, Janine, for your great insights today. It's been a wonderful way of understanding a little bit more about all the different diverse supply chains that we have within our goat industry. And hopefully the producers on the webinar today were able to get a great insight into how they can actually fit for purpose, produce their goats for the different markets. So thanks everyone for joining. And we will release this as a recording that will be housed on the MLA Goats Hub Consumer to Grid website. So thank you very much for your time today, and Janine for your insights.
My pleasure.